Hello and welcome to another episode of So Fly. It is the middle of February. We're back in the studio on a snowy middle of February night.
We seem to keep doing podcasts in the middle of a blizzard.
Yeah, like crazy snowstorms here in Ontario. But yeah, my name is Mitch, and of course we got Yilma here.
Hey, guys.
And we've got Aldo.
Hey, guys.
And we've got a very special guest calling in today, all the way from Pennsylvania. He is the owner of Trout and Feather, which is a content brand on the internet, and he's published, I think, something like over 200 videos, but we'll get him to confirm that, and is an incredible fly tyer, an incredible angler. We're very excited to have Tim Cammisa on the show. Tim, how's it going?
Hey, it's going great, Mitch. Hey, thanks for the intro. And before we get too far into this, I got to tell you, you guys are doing an awesome job on the podcast. Like, keep it going. Half the time I love that. I think other podcasts would look at some of the content as like, this is our B-roll. We're not going to show that stuff. And I love that there's the podcast that I just get into with you guys. You just let it roll, and we're kind of like in the seats with you. So I completely appreciate that. So thanks for everything you're doing, and I hope you guys keep this going.
Oh, thank you so much, Tim. That's amazing. Kind words.
Yeah,
it gets
absolutely.
us so jazzed.
It's truthful.
Smiling
it's truthful.
from ear to ear, Tim.
Yeah, that's wicked, man. Thank you so much.
Well, great, guys.
So we're drinking, we've got some nice 40 Creek going tonight, Premium Barrel Select.
A little bit of whiskey, Canadian whiskey
on a cold Canadian night, as James Bond said last episode. Wow, yeah, that's a very Canadian thing. Sitting in the CBC building too.
Yeah.
Nonetheless. So we're very excited to have you on, Tim. First, I think we just want to jump into a little bit about sort of like who you are in the fly fishing community, what you do, how you sort of found yourself getting into Trout and Feather, and just kind of like how that sort of all unfolded.
Yeah, of course, I'll be happy to. And I'm very jealous of my buddy James Bond that he got to see that studio, because whenever I see your Instagram, and there was a picture, or maybe it was on the website of that studio, it looks it's rocking over there. And I'm so jealous that you're there, and I'm sitting in my basement right now, my unfinished basement at my fly tying desk, and I'm like, man, I am really missing out. So James, you were very lucky in this one.
That's awesome.
I mean, we're really lucky. We record out of an old CBC, which is the Canadian, Federal Broadcasting
building.
Which is so cool. It's a lot of history here. Yeah.
You got to come to the studio when you come down to Ontario. If you find yourself here, we'll have you in.
I'm in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to get up there to fish that Grand River. So next time I'm up there, I'm going to stop over, please.
Oh, great.
Thanks for the invite.
Well, we'd like to fish with you.
Yeah.
I guess.
Cool.
I guess Tim. When did you pick up a fly rod?
Yeah, well, I guess we'll get into that. So I first started learning how to tie flies before I was a fly fisherman, and I learned around maybe fourth grade. I was in this after-school program, and we had this old dude that was this fly tyer, and he had, we all kind of went to this classroom afterwards, and we learned how to tie these flies. And it was just about you were having fun, you were spinning deer hair, and it was just like all these really crazy patterns. And after maybe 2 or 3 classes, I remember my dad picked me up, and he was like, hey, your Uncle John is really into this, and he's a really big fly fisherman. And I was like, what's fly fishing? I knew about spin fishing and that kind of stuff up until that point. But my dad kind of, really almost reintroduced me to my great Uncle John. I just wanted to just spend every moment from that point on just investigating this, getting into it, just trying to figure out more about it. And I just fell in love with the sport. It was just so much fun. So I think my early days were really just focused on tying flies, and I thought it was so cool that you could catch a fish on a fly that you tied. It didn't matter what the fish was at first. It was just, man, this is crazy. Then, of course, like a lot of people, I kind of made that evolution, and I got to catch trout, because I was one of those suckers that, after the fly fishing movie came out, that River Runs Through It, that just kind of exploded the sport. I was fortunate that I was already into the sport prior to that, but once that movie came out, it just kind of got so many more people fired up about it. And then I read that darn John Gierek. I just loved his stories. And you just kind of combine, all these people are into it. I have a couple personal connections, because my father was a fly fisherman as well. Not as much as my great uncle, but he was a big fly fisherman. And then I'm reading these John Gierek stories, and it was just like, you're all in. And that was just it for since, you know what I mean? So I've been doing it for almost 30 years now, and it's just been completely all invested.
What was it about fly tying that got you so jazzed, in the start?
You know what? I wish I could tell you there was one thing, and I love this. I have this old, I think it's called a Plano fishing box, and I remember they asked us, that old plastic one. And mine I had an advanced one. It had this flap that came down on the front. You had these little trays, and I still have it. I look through, I see those early flies that I tied. They were so hideous, but I love them, and I recommend to any fly tyer, your first dozen flies, put them away and label them, and just come back to them every now and then, because there's just something cool about that memory. But I wish I could tell you, oh, I love the fact that you could fish with them, but I don't know. I think it was just that you kind of get lost in that, and you're just tying these flies, and you're kind of learning along the way. And I think it was a challenge for me because some of those early flies, they were hideous, and the eye of my hook was covered. I would never be able to get a tippet or a leader through them. And I think it was just that whole challenge of, I see this fly in this book, and I want my fly to look like it, and it wasn't. And I had to just keep working at it until like one day they actually started looking like that, and then they just progressed from that point forward.
It's funny you talk about starting. I remember the first thing I tied was like a bucktail jig I saw in a book, and I used a sewing thread and like some like lint I found laying around, basically
in your belly button.
And it was just like the worst looking thing ever, but I still have it actually in the Plano box.
Oh, that's cool. Now, do all three of you tie?
Well, I mean,
this is a sticking point, Tim.
Yeah, because they're pointing their fingers at me, Tim, and it's Yilma here. Like my resolution, I don't have resolutions because I think every day could be a resolution, a change. But I feel like this is my year for tying. I tied my first woolly booger last year, and it was pretty nice for my first tie. So I'm looking to get into it because I'm a designer. I think Aldo thinks that I can be good at it. I just
think you have a good knack for design and.
Thank you, Aldo.
And I think, I think it's got a trend.
Yeah.
I have some, I have another good friend, David Adams, who we took fishing a couple times, and he's a designer as well. And he just really, he sank his teeth into fly fishing for the first time this year, but he really got into tying as well, and his stuff is great. So I mean, you got to tie.
Yeah. So it's in the back. I'm tying, Tim.
Okay. Well, I thought I heard on your 2018 recap that Yilma, you were talking about that that was kind of your resolution, that you were hoping to do that more. I thought that was you. So
that was me.
I mean,
hold them to it, Tim.
I'm not calling him out. No, Aldo, I'm not calling him out. But because I understand there's also that time component. This is like whenever I go to a lot of these fly fishing shows, and I'm a featured headliner, or I shouldn't say it like that. I'm a featured speaker at these shows, and I'm more known down that fly tying realm. But there's a lot of fly fishermen who come up to me who just they're looking almost, I don't want to say they want to spark that argument, but they want to know, like, why do you do it? Why do you tie? Like, versus it's so much quicker to go out and buy these flies. And I get it, because if you have a job where you're working crazy hours and you're looking for any downtime, and your downtime's fishing, there's very little time to learn a new hobby. And it's a steep learning curve for fly tying. I get it. Yeah. So I'm with you, Yilma. Just hang in there. Hang in there, man.
Thanks, Tim.
It's interesting you brought up tying flies versus buying flies. Like, how do you feel about that?
My feeling has changed in the last maybe 5 or 10 years. If you would have asked me a decade ago, I would have said, like, if you don't tie your own flies, like, you're really missing the boat. And I don't want to say I still believe that, because I do. I'm a fly tyer, and to me it's not even about matching the natural insects. It's just knowing that I can sit down, tie these flies that I think are going to catch fish, go out and get that reinforcement that they do, or that I have to make changes. So to me, it's such a natural connection. But then I also started learning how to tie flies when I'm 10. So it's very easy. And my father-in-law, like, he loves to go fly fishing. Like, he just loves to go out fly fishing with me. And he realized I had this YouTube thing going on, and I was really invested in this. He asked me if I could teach him how to tie flies, and I gave him the recommendations on what to buy, what hooks, what books to buy, what vise. I mean, he bought everything, just the whole way. And the dexterity isn't there for his tying, and the time's not there. And for him, it's obviously, he has me as well for his son-in-law, so he wants me to tie his flies. Yeah. So that's kind of his first leg up. But the other issue is that for him, like, if he has those free moments, he gets out and he goes fishing. And now whenever I said, like, my thoughts have changed, it's because my wife and I have a son, and we fish all the time. I mean, pretty much every weekend throughout the summer. The three of us go fishing. I have a little backpack that I carry my son in, and we have a blast, and it's so much fun. But now I also know, like, you're exhausted. So I'm a teacher. I get home, and, we're playing with our son until it's his bedtime. And then he goes down, and, I have this YouTube, and I have these presentations to plan for. And I'm very lucky, because my wife loves to fly fish, but she doesn't tie flies. So now I'm tying flies for me, for my wife. And it's like, wow, it's a lot to it. And you really you got to crank them out. And then, so whenever I look at it from that perspective, and here I'm trying to convince people, learn how to tie flies. And you have these other 1,000 things going on in your life, but it'll be easy and you'll love it. So I can accept both sides. I mean, but which way I lean.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, yeah, it makes sense too. I mean, I guess it all depends on how into fly tying somebody gets, right? Like it's just all relative, I suppose.
Sure.
Okay, let's take a step back. And so let's go back to, I have two questions. The first question is, do you remember your first fish and on the fly? And do you remember what fly it was by any crazy chance? I know it can be a tough one, but.
My first fish was probably a bluegill. I can't say I remember it. I have a terrible memory, Mitch. Just terrible. So the fly, I'm going to guess it was a bluegill only because we have some lakes that are in our area, and my father loves to go out to these lakes, and I'm 99% sure it was a bluegill on either moraine or it was a trout whenever my dad took me fly fishing for the first time, and I got lucky. But I wish I could tell you, but no, my memory's not that good. I'm sorry.
But you learned to fly fish in Pennsylvania, right? Correct?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, we're very fortunate in this state just because there's a really kind of a historical basis, and I think you guys do understand that as well. And we're very fortunate to know that there have been these famous fly fishermen, or these, I shouldn't even say famous, just these notable fly fishermen that have pushed the sport and pushed the sports of both tying and fishing over the years. And it's kind of cool to follow in those footsteps and fish those same hallowed waters, and just kind of know that there is a lot of tradition in Pennsylvania, which is good and which is also bad, because there is so much tradition. When you try to break free of that, you're almost seen as you're an outsider in your own state.
Yeah.
And that could be tricky too, if you know what I mean.
It's an interesting point, because I was going to ask, what was your sort of upbringing in the fly fishing world, so to speak, in Pennsylvania, knowing that there is all this tradition and there is so much like a different sort of lens put on the sport there because it's so respected.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I told you about my great uncle John. I featured him in some of my videos over the year, and he was easily my greatest mentor growing up in terms of fly fishing. And I kind of based my own fly fishing and my thoughts and my ideas and opinions on his. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, my Uncle John, he's the one who first started building bamboo fly rods. So I had to build bamboo fly rods, which is how I connected with James Bond. So I've kind of followed in his footsteps. And because of that, like some of these flies, like a sucker spawn or a green weenie that people have been catching fish on, just pulling them in left and right, like we wouldn't use those because that's, a trout wouldn't eat a sucker spawn. Like there's no self-respecting like brown trout that would actually eat a sucker spawn. Even if there's suckers in that river and they're spawning, like, no, you just don't use that. And I'll be honest, I can remember whenever I was a teenager, I was fishing this stream with these wild trout in it. And I looked down in the water and I saw this really big trout. I mean, it was a really big trout. And I was standing on the bank, and I just had this ability where I was standing, I was able to make a cast. And this trout was ignoring everything. And for some goofy reason, I decided to put on like a blue or a pink sucker spawn that I had left over during steelhead fishing season. I put it on, and this trout like charged the sucker spawn, just crushed it on the first hit, ran 75 yards. I was nearly into my backing. I mean, it was just like, this is all in. And I felt guilty. And it was like, there was this guilt, like, why am I using sucker spawn? Like, I can't let anyone see me catch this fish on the sucker spawn. So that was, like, if that's the story that kind of defined my teenage years, it was that. So it took a while to kind of get away from that.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that story because we were on opening Trout Day 2018. We were on the river with Mitch's uncle, and he caught the biggest brown I've ever seen out of the Credit River on a sucker spawn. And again, you're right. Like I would have never, although I was using like squirmy worms all day, I wouldn't have thought to use sucker. But yeah, that was a huge fish. So kind of funny that story definitely reigned true.
How do you feel about that now? Like how is using
I mean, I can tell you like my number 5 most popular video now is the mop fly. So if that tells you kind of how I've changed, it took a while because, and I think this is what makes fly fishing such a special sport. And it's that if you choose to swing wet flies, like traditional wets, like that's your thing, and you can do that. And if you choose to fish the squirmies and the mop flies and all these wonderful flies that we kind of gained from the competition world, because you really just want to get as many trout as you can, like you can. I think that's cool. And at least from my perspective, and especially in Pennsylvania and a lot of the areas that I fish now, it's nice to see that those, I want to say it's kind of breaking down to the point where people aren't as critical of each other for that. Because it's a sport. I mean, you would hope that you wouldn't have that criticism. But I can tell you before I released that mop fly video, like I cringed and I thought, once this goes live, like what are, you know, 75-yards. I was nearly into my backing. I mean, it was just like, this is all in. And I think that's the story that kind of defined my teenage years. It was that, like if that's the story that kind of defined my teenage years, it was that.
Right.
are there people who watch my videos who have seen me tie, these traditional Catskill style flies over the years, and they're now seeing a shift in my flies to see more like jig hooks and tungsten beads, and they're seeing that stuff now. And I really cringed, and I thought, how are they going to respond to this? And it was a great response, and which I didn't do it for the response. It's a fly that works. Like the mop fly is a really popular fly. So yes, I fished them. And one of my most recent videos from the summer that I released was a micro mop. And I kind of mentioned the fly shop where I learned about this material, and this fly shop loves me now because they sold like 150 packets of this material in the first week when my video was released. So they were just like, "Damn, like you got to mention us in every video." And I'm like, "Sorry, like it doesn't go that way. Like, sorry, that's not the way it goes." But it was cool, like to know. I guess I'm not saying I've matured in my fishing, but you have to kind of get over things and say, like, if that person wants to fish with a strike indicator, let them do it. Like, who cares?
Yeah,
so
if
that
who
makes
cares?
sense.
Well, I think you raised a really interesting point where it's like it's kind of two things. It's like one, you're a creator, you're an authority on the sport that's putting out content that people have an opinion about. So it's like it's interesting that you just touched on, how you create things and have to think about what the repercussions are in terms of people taking it in. But also that the idea that fly fishing, or at least what it's turned into, has become more of like a sport where people they really identify with it, and it's almost like there's so much more a sense of individuality, which is really cool,
Sure.
Because
you're exactly right.
Which is neat, because the heritage, the tradition is really, I love that stuff. But it's like, it's also like, there's nothing wrong with a mop fly, and it's cool that we can just,
Yeah, I think you take the good of where the sport came from, and you take the good of the innovation, and then at the end of the day, just fish however you want to fish.
You want,
but
that's right.
But I think it's you didn't get any negative comments from your consumers or your viewers.
Oh, absolutely. Of course you get negative comments.
Yeah, I wish
I wish I could say you didn't.
No, I
mean,
know.
Yeah, it's a small percentage, and I'm not sure what your podcast is like and the audience respond, how they're able to respond to you. For YouTube, it's out there, and I mean, people can leave comments, and we don't necessarily have to go down this path. But the one thing that I want to say to people sometimes is, hey, like you're getting free videos. Like if you don't like it, you can click the pause button. And now if I say something wrong, or if I say something that just doesn't connect, like absolutely, like I love the discussion page of YouTube pages. I just love that whole notion that you can leave a comment and multiple times, like the creator will come back on, or other people will just have a conversation down there. And I encourage that in my videos. I absolutely do. Every now and then you'll get a hater, and you just have to just decide what route you want to go. I'm pretty professional in my response, where I'll just say, hey, thanks for your opinion. That was great. I look forward to your opinion on other videos, or I'll just delete the comment, because there's some people. I mean, there was one individual that was, every video that came out, this person just had nothing positive to say. They could not find anything positive. And I thought, why do you keep watching my videos? Like after the first 3 or 4, wouldn't you have just said, I'm done with Tim? Like I'm done, but he still does. But like you're saying, I'm very cognizant of that, because I think my most recent release, maybe 2 videos ago, was about strike indicators, and it was about this big airlock strike indicator, and during the video, they're wonderful, and they have their place. And anyone who's commented on social media about it, because I post my videos, I self-promote a little bit, and I post them on Facebook and on Instagram and all that fun stuff. And it's really funny, because there's kind of a dialogue that will get started on some of the Facebook groups about the video. And the stuff that they're saying, it's obvious that they never watched the video, because that stuff was all said in the video. And I thought, here I am. I take all this time to really just make sure I'm covering my bases, because they're right. Like it's not the only indicator. Or if you're into tight line nymphing, like maybe that's not the best approach for you in that situation. And that's where the conversation goes. And I think that's the trickiest part of, having a YouTuber putting out something that's up for discussion, is that it's not even that I'm trying to cover all my bases. Like I want to forward the discussion, and I just hope people at least give the video an opportunity to say, all right, I'm going to at least look at this and think about it a little bit more in depth before I just blast something out there and don't even think about it.
That's what my point is. Like the open-mindedness is what we love. And I think that's essential. It's one thing, because I follow this designer. His name is Draplin, and he's incredible. But his style is a certain way, but his style couldn't have got there if he didn't know the fundamentals. You know what I mean? He knows all the different styles, and I think that's what's essential. And I think that's and that's why you can pivot. That's why you have what if we did this and what if we did that?
And I think like the hater type comments, like that's good. I like when we see that stuff.
Yeah, no, that's great.
For us, that's why our podcast exists, because people have such like dead fast like opinions about the most ridiculous stuff, and B, that people actually care enough to be like, these guys suck, or these guys are great. It's great.
Well, yes, I know what you mean. I kind of wish I had more hate comments, because it would give me something to like.
It gives you more. It gives you more.
I don't want
press.
like your listeners thinking like, man, Tim must get a lot of hate. Like,
no,
I get
of
like
course.
maybe one comment a month.
Of course. Yeah.
Whenever I get the comment, it's like, can you believe this? And
yeah.
I'm a teacher. Like that's my actual field. So I'm a sixth grade teacher, and I teach on a team of there's 3 of us that work together. And my students know about my YouTube channel, and everyone gives me a hard time about it at school, just because like they're like, this is your other side. Like we don't get to see this side all the time. And I tell them about like, if I get a negative comment now and then, and of course like one of my colleagues, she's a female, and she'll say something along the line, well, Taylor Swift will tell you, haters are going to hate. Just brush it off. Right. And then my other colleague though, like he wants to know what they said. He's like, please tell me. He loves the controversy. And of course, like this year, I mean, this will be the last story I'll tell about the haters. Yeah. Because I don't want to give them too much airtime. They're loving it. Like,
for
yes,
sure.
we got, because it's just more comical than anything else. And somebody commented, and they said something along the line of like, you're sitting there and you're recording these videos and you're holding your coffee mug. Like, who do you think you are? Are you the king of the ties? And I get this comment, and I'm just like cracking up. I'm like, this is funny. I take a screenshot and I delete the comment, because what do you say to that? Like, there's nothing you can say. Like, period. It's just delete. Yeah. But I made the mistake of forwarding it to my colleague, just to say, hey, you'd love to see whenever I get a hate comment. Yeah. Here was a funny one, and I shouldn't have done that, because I walk into school like the next day. He has now told all the students that that's my new nickname, the King of the Ties. They're now addressing to me as the King. They're bowing to me whenever I come in. And they're commenting on my channel now. They're like, this is another great tie from the King of the Ties. And I'm like, oh, no. Like, no. That's awesome. Don't let that out there. No. So it's definitely something to have fun with.
Yeah, for sure.
You might have to change Trout and Feather to King of the Ties. Or Lord of the Ties.
Yeah. Lord of the Ties.
Lord of the Ties. Lord of the Ties. Yeah.
You keep that hashtag. That's all you do.
Keep Lord of the Ties?
Amazing. Okay, well, yes.
Oh, no, sorry, Mitch, you go.
Oh, no, of course. I just wanted to ask, like, how did you, like, what made you want to start the YouTube channel to begin with? I know we're talking about your channel, but, like, what made you want to get into doing that?
Yeah, well, I love fly tying. Like, that was for sure. And there was a friend of mine who lived, like, on the West Coast, wanted to see how I tied a certain fly. So I was like, sure, I'll make a little, like, I knew about this YouTube thing. And this was around maybe 7 years ago or so. And I thought, well, if nothing else, I'll make this video. I didn't want to put it out there to look like, a goof. I thought I'll try to make it to look like just the at least at the time, I thought it was kind of a semi-professional looking video. It was of a sulfur parachute fly. Like, you just love the pattern. Wanted to show how, like, my style of a parachute fly, and just uploaded it and just kind of, like, let it sit there. And it was weird, because after it released, like, I kind of watched it and just to see how everything went out. And I got like views on it, and like people commented on it. I was like, that's really weird. Like, I was just putting this out there for this friend. And so I waited a couple weeks, and like people, like, I got these notifications from YouTube, like, hey, they like this video. And I thought, it's kind of weird. Like, maybe I'll do another one. So about a month after that first one, which I just put out there just for my friend to see how I tie my parachutes, I was like, well, I'll tie something else. And I just put out another one. And then it was weird how it just kind of progressed from that point, and it just has continued ever since. So I've had to take it in different directions once it started to get a little bit bigger than I anticipated. But it was wild to know that I'm just kind of sharing something that I love just for everyone out there to see, and it's just kind of grown into something else.
Would you say that, I mean, obviously, your background in education, I mean, was that obviously an inspiration to also, educate in the world of fly tying? Like, maybe take one of your hobbies and turn it into a passion? Like, has teaching always been something that's, interested you?
Yes and no.
Whether it's professionally or not so much?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I'm sure, kind of like the 3 of you, and I think a lot of people want to figure out, like, where their niche is, especially in fly fishing, because it has that kind of that feel good thing where you just feel like you want to be a part of it, and you just have to figure out, like, where's my place in it. And whenever I first started teaching, like, I had my summers off, and I decided I wanted to, I wanted to get into fly fishing at some point, so I took advantage of my summers and I started guiding in eastern Pennsylvania on the Delaware River. And it was awesome. It was fantastic. But then I started to realize, I'm a teacher, and during my time off, I'm taking other people fly fishing. And I thought, I really thought guiding was going to be for me. And then I realized, this is kind of prohibiting my fishing time because I'm helping other people do it, and I'm almost not going down in my skill set, but you could tell I just didn't feel like that I was making that progress that I wanted to.
Can I interject
in terms of
just
catching fish?
Sorry. Could I interject
Yeah,
for a second? Do you still guide at all, or no?
No.
Okay.
No, I get asked to, but it's just not my thing because it takes so much time. I guide my wife. If you ask her, yes, I guide her every weekend, and she loves it. She's getting a lot for her money's worth. That's for sure.
That's awesome.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to derail that thought. I was just curious.
No, it's okay. No, please do. So once I kind of took a step back from the guiding, and I thought, geez, this isn't it. Then that's when I just really kind of rededicated myself into fly fishing and just becoming a better, more well-rounded fisherman and now this kind of ties back in because of that, my history in Pennsylvania being steeped in some of this tradition. I really wanted to kind of get outside of that and just, figure out a little bit more about fly fishing beyond my comfort level. So that's kind of, I started to go off in that direction. And then, lo and behold, that's kind of when YouTube, I don't want to say fell into my lap, but I put out these videos, and I think this probably ties in a little bit because of my teaching background. I got a lot of positive comments, a lot more than I anticipated. And it was because I really did take my time to explain stuff and go over the history of the flies or talk about how they're being used and in what situations do you fish this pattern, which is a little bit different than a lot of the other YouTube creators because every creator has their own style. And that's the important part is that you really want to showcase what, you're known for and what you want to be known for. And I think mine was just going a little bit more in depth and I'm a talker. So that was also something that came natural. Like, hey, I can talk for 15 or 20 minutes and not just show the fly, but I can also kind of share my own experiences with it. And I think that's kind of attributed to the success of my channel.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, being able to carry the content in a natural way, in an entertaining, interesting way is a big thing, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So when it comes to instruction and teaching, you're a teacher in your professional life, you teach fly tying, you were guiding at some point. What do you find inspires you to keep doing it?
Oh man, that's a really tricky one. I can tell you I guess I'll tell the story. There's this fly tying symposium that takes place every year. It's called the International Fly Tying Symposium. It's imagine a room full of the best fly tyers in the country, and it also has a little bit of an international flavor. And I've been very fortunate because I was asked to present there a number of years ago, and I had to decline. I just got married, and I just had a lot of stuff going on, and I really wanted to. And the show's creator, Chuck Furimsky, he remembered me, and he'd watched my YouTube videos, and the next year he offered the invitation again, and I took him up on it. And so every year I go to this show. I give these presentations. I get to connect with a lot of people that I only I know of from the online experience. And this year, I shouldn't say this. Every year on Saturday night there's a banquet, and it's just a really wonderful event. And this year I'm sitting at the banquet, and I'm sitting next to this gentleman and his wife, and I'm there with a few of my friends, and we're all at this table with around 12 people. And as I'm talking to this gentleman, his name's Jim, and he says to his wife, that's Tim, right? And she said, yeah, that's Tim. I knew his voice right away. And he said, he's the one who taught me how to tie flies. And he was almost saying it was it was just, I'm not saying he was saying it with a tear in his eyes, but I felt like I was supposed to cry or something because he literally has watched all of my videos and has just, if I said this is the way to do it, he's done it that way. Mm-hmm. And I think whenever I actually get to connect with people in real life and I hear comments like that, because this guy was, 60 years old, and here he is saying, I've been watching your videos for almost a decade, and you're the reason I still tie flies today. That really, those types of instances really have just a profound impact on me.
That's amazing. That's an incredible experience. Yeah, absolutely. I
mean,
that's
I'm very lucky.
Yeah, that's an amazing. That's definitely an inspiring thing for sure. Yeah.
Tim, you mentioned obviously going to the fly fishing symposiums. How many do you do shows pretty often? Like how much are you traveling for this? I guess is my question. I guess.
Not very much, although it's tricky. I'd love to do it more. I mean, I think as all of us know, in fly fishing, we're not driving around Mercedes Benzes because we get paid that much.
Yilma is, but
Good for him. He's the smart one of the group.
Why, thank you, Tim.
One in every 4, so he's the one out of us 4.
Well, Mercedes looks a lot like a little Volkswagen.
Yeah, it looks like a VW.
It's weird. It's weird. It Mercedes looks exactly like a Volkswagen in every way, somehow.
Oh, that's perfect. I like the shows. I really enjoy the shows, but I did tell my wife, and I kind of made this a little promise in a sense, and I kind of say I won't do more than one show a month, just because it can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I mean, I get contacted pretty much every week or every 2 weeks. I get invited by a fly fishing club or a trout club or some type of a show to be a headliner or just to give a presentation. And it's weird for me because a lot of people will reach out and like, I'm from Pennsylvania, but on YouTube, for some reason, I don't say that very much. I mean, I tell about myself, but I don't go into extreme details by any means. And I'll get emails just like, hey, Tim, we're having a meeting next week. Is there any chance you can pop in and maybe do a fly tying demo for 45 minutes? And they're in Montana. And I have to say, like, no, I'm in Pennsylvania. Like, it's not really that easy to just pop in. And it's crazy because I'm saying this, like, I get a lot of emails like that. Now that I think as my channel's grown a little bit more, people have realized kind of my honey hole areas, Pennsylvania and New York and New Jersey and Michigan and Ohio. I get reached out a lot by those groups too to say, hey, will you stop over? And it's definitely doable. But then the next issue that I have is that I am a teacher, and we only get so many personal days and so many days off a year. We have all summer, but trout clubs don't meet in the summer. That's not when they're having those banquets. Yeah, so it's very tricky. Like when I went to a recent fly fishing show in the fall, and like my students are telling me before I go, hey, good luck at the show. Like they know I'm going to be gone. So if I take like a personal day or if I take a day off, like they know that's where I am. Like I can't hide that. So I have to really be cognizant of that because I love my day job, and it's the one that really provides the income for me. So I have to be aware that that's my number one responsibility, and these shows are second. Maybe someday in the future, I'd love to have an early retirement and I can kind of dedicate more time. But I can tell you at one of the more recent shows, I was slated to give a presentation on like a Friday afternoon, and I had to call the show sponsor and say, hey, listen, I'd love to do this. Thanks for putting me in one of these primo spots, but I can't be there, and you have to take that off your website because if my administration sees it, like I'm getting called into HR on Monday, and they're gonna like it just can't happen. And this person's mad. They're like, what are you talking about? Like I'm giving you this spot. And I'm like, I know, but I just can't do it. So I really have to kind of pick and choose my shows throughout the year. So I'm fortunate in that I am asked to do some of the bigger ones, and whenever I can say yes to those shows, it makes it a little bit more worthwhile.
Cool.
So I love that. I got a question for you. I've seen, so we do a lot of little, fly tying events here. We have What the Fly, we have Flies and Flights, and we're seeing it's packed. So I guess my question is, do you see this as a shrinking sort of art sport at all, or do you see momentum
in fly tying?
In fly tying.
In fly tying.
Yeah.
Man, I don't want to say I see either one. What I tend to see more is I see growth in different areas of the country because I'm kind of centered in the United States in terms of my YouTube channel, and I have access to my analytics, and I see kind of my views in other countries, and I have views in a few European countries and in Canada and South America, but throughout the country, I can see like the pockets where it really is on the rise. For instance, in Denver right now, in Colorado, like in that area, like it has really it's always been a hotbed for fly fishing and fly tying, but it has really just kind of started to skyrocket versus some of the more traditional places. I don't see it growing as much anymore. And it's weird that it kind of slows down in one area and it picks up in another area. I definitely am more encouraged by whenever I see fly tying events, especially those that take place at a brewery, and you get such a younger crowd. And it's really awesome to see, like, whenever you have them kind of centered around there, you do have this younger crowd. But in the Pittsburgh area, we kind of have like a mix and match of, because I'm centered in Western Pennsylvania, and we have this kind of mix and match of individuals. The types of flies they expect you to tie at those events are completely different than what they would expect me to tie if I was out in Colorado tying. So it's definitely, I don't want to say I see growth or I don't see growth, but I definitely still see tires, and I can tell you just from at least watching the views on my videos, they've been consistently going up. They've been increasing. I don't know if I attribute it to more tires out there or just my videos or, they're just connecting with more people. But that's where I see it, just pockets. You'll just see this pocket of growth really centered more around young people than anything else.
I wonder why. I wonder what it is. Like, why do you think it's Denver, Colorado, for example, or a pocket? What do you think is happening there that's causing younger people to get into the sport?
I think it's the culture to be outside and to just do more stuff outside. Because, I mean, I don't know about you, but we've had a lot of conversations even within the school system about like technology and the notion of smartphones, and you can't go anywhere without your phone anymore. That's it's accepted. And I think there's so many people now that are kind of taking the outdoors for granted. And I'm not here to say like get off your phone or anything like that. I mean, I have one. Like I use it all the time. I mean, my wife would probably say I'm on mine, more than I need to be, and she might admit that for herself too. But whenever I think about those areas where I see that growth, it's with people who really appreciate the outdoors more than some other areas. And I think it's just natural that the more that you're outside, the more you want to connect with it. And fly tying's a way to do that whenever you kind of add on to that experience of fly fishing, and it just makes it a little bit more rewarding in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's for sure. Okay. I want to take a second here to think a little bit more about, or talk a little bit with you about how, okay, we got Yilma sitting here. His resolution for the year is getting into fly tying. What are some tips for beginners? What are some things that, you're starting out fly tying? What are some things that you think people could learn about, getting into it?
This should be my question, Tim, but I'm going to let Mitch take it.
Sorry, you just want to repeat what he just said?
Yeah, I kind of do. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
If you want to restate it, go ahead.
No.
All right. Well, am I allowed to say first, watch my videos, Yilma? That will be number one.
Yeah.
So if you watch them,
100%.
you'll be good there. But,
you mean again?
No. I mean, if you're a beginner, first of all, I get tons of questions from beginners, and it's like some of the more common questions are, what flies should I tie? Like, what are the first 5 flies to tie? And it's funny because over the years, it's like you had the woolly bugger, or maybe you had some certain streamers, and now like you have to tie the mop or the squirmy wormy. And it kind of, I don't like to give any answers for that, but I tell people, like, if you are already in fly fishing, because I kind of make the assumption that anyone who's getting into fly tying probably was into fly fishing already, and they've now decided to connect it. So the first thing that I tell people is, don't watch YouTube. Don't reinvest in watching all these specific channels. Just look into your fly box and say to yourself, what are the 3 to 6 most common flies that I fish? And now let's just concentrate on learning how to tie one of those flies.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my first piece of advice, because I mean, when we go into a fly shop, you see just all of this stuff, and it's overwhelming for me at times whenever I go into some of the larger ones, because there's just so many new products that are constantly on the rise, and you feel like I got to have all this stuff. I don't know where I'm going to use it, but I just want it. And whenever I purchase stuff, I don't just buy like one of it. I buy every color, because I just feel like if I don't have every color, that one color that I don't have, I'm going to need. So I'm just this like hoarder when it comes to fly tying stuff. Yeah. But then I look through my stuff, and when I'm going through all my materials, there's only like 4 or 5 that I feel like I'm even using on a regular basis. So that would be my next tip, is after you have those patterns that you've decided on, just say to yourself, what are the 2 most common sizes that I fish these in? Buy the materials for, those 3 patterns in a couple different sizes, and then you can kind of start to break it down. And it's up to that individual person, because some people can't just sit down for 3 weeks in a row and just tie the same fly. If you have that patience, and if you have that almost durability, or, if you're able to do that, it's really rewarding to be able to just concentrate and then start to break down the pattern to really try your best to mimic whatever you think it's supposed to look like. And that's kind of, from that point, then whenever I get that next tier of questions, like, all right, I got my flies, I'm ready to start tying them. What do I do next? And I think I told you, whenever I first started, tying flies, I would crowd the eye. I mean, I'm sure there's early videos of mine that I still probably crowd the eye, because it's just a natural tendency to build it up. And that's like the first step is, don't go anywhere near the eye of the fly until you're ready to tie off. That's number 1. And then number 2, make sure you've learned how to, complete a whip finish or a bunch of half hitches, and do them occasionally. Like I don't, but there's nothing worse than a beginner and you have like maybe 4 out of the 8 steps complete and your fly just comes unraveled. It's very disheartening, and it's easy to see why people give up. So those are kind of my early tips: are learn how to tie knots, stay away from the eye of the hook, and then, most importantly, try to match the proportions of whatever that fly is you're attempting to mimic, either the natural insect, or if you're just trying to match another pattern that, maybe it's the hare's ear. Try to match the proportions of that hare's ear to your own. And once you get those proportions down, everything else will really just start to fall in line.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really not overcomplicating it and just keeping it simple. I'm paying close attention, as you can see. But yeah, those are great.
Good.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Go ahead.
Like, be more like utilitarian,
Yeah.
with your selection. Like, just look at what you use, and maybe you should just tie that instead of buying it. Now, on that note, you mentioned you've kind of been moving towards doing a lot of tutorials. Like, we've brought up the mop fly a couple times, but talking about guide flies,
Yeah.
as opposed to maybe flies that maybe are a little bit prettier, or ones that you find in a fly shop. I mean, ever since I started guiding last year, I realized really quickly what it meant to tie guide flies. Are you finding that people are being a little bit more utilitarian with their tying, or maybe, I guess there's probably, like, what am I trying to ask here? Like, is there a push? I guess what I'm asking is, is there a push towards being a little bit simpler and more utilitarian with flies, or is there still that, that thirst to be a little bit more ornate, like tying a salmon fly or something for just the art of doing it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's one that I think that's really the heart of fly tying, and this kind of probably goes back to whenever I was mentioning that what's great about fly fishing is very similar with fly tying. You can go in whatever direction you want. I mean, whenever it comes to salmon flies, that's something like I've always said, I hope someday I'm going to be able to sit down and tie a salmon fly. If it takes me X amount of hours, like, that's fine. I can really appreciate that side. And for any of your listeners that tie their own salmon flies and they know how to marry wings, like, that's awesome. I just recently read that book. Is it The Feathered Thief? And it was it was so intriguing. And for any listener out there, like, pause the podcast right now, like, go to your library or like,
well, I don't know about that.
Go to Amazon. It was such an awesome read, and I don't even tie salmon flies, but it was just cool to see that this book in the Feather Thief, they're talking about these individuals who are purchasing these exotic materials, and they don't even fish. It's just to tie flies. So you look at that end, and you have people who just appreciate it from the art form, and I'll kind of circle back around to your question. So you have that's the one end of the spectrum. Then you kind of have that middle end of the spectrum where you have people tying all these different patterns from realistic to a little bit more, to match the insect. And then you kind of have those guide flies on the far right. So whenever you kind of look at that entire spectrum, I would like to tell you, like, I can tell you personally, my own tying has shifted more towards the guide flies because they catch fish. And it may be because I hang out with more individuals that are, in these competitions. And one of my close friends is a member of Fly Fishing Team USA. His name's Josh Miller, and he's just an incredible fly fisherman, and he cranks out flies that people would not believe the flies that he catches fish on. They're just that simple and they're that basic. And a lot of people haven't realized that it's not really about the fly so much as it is the technique behind it. And like, I get it now, but when I circle back around and we talk about that International Fly Tying Symposium, you walk into this room, it's this giant ballroom, and you have every style of fly tyer there. And I remember one year, Josh and I were walking through, and we were like, don't look at these flies because, like, they're flies like neither one of us would fish. Like we're not looking down upon them by any means. And I hope people don't look at it from that perspective, but they're not needed. Right. And it's tricky because now whenever you pull the social media aspect on it and you go on Instagram and you see some of these beautiful flies, there's fly tyers out there who put those flies out there and they're fishing them just to kind of prove to other people you can catch fish on these beautiful flies. And it's kind of like, it's almost comical. Like, you don't have to do that. Like, it's great that you tie them. Like, I appreciate them. Like, I hope that I'm able to tie a salmon fly at some point in my life. Like, I can absolutely appreciate that. But I guess using that word utilitarian, I guess that kind of is where I am in my current tying right now because of a lack of time. And I just am not investing in a lot of these more intricate techniques that I would have invested in 5 or 10 years ago.
So do you think that, that's an interesting point. Like, I wonder if, fly tying is sort of its own thing altogether. Do you think that some people get more into fly tying than they do the fishing part?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I can tell you whenever people ask me the question, like, Tim, do you prefer fly tying or fly fishing? Like, right then, I know their answer because I don't think any fly fisherman would ask that question because you're a fly fisherman. Like, so I know right then, like, oh, I know the answer they're looking for, and they're not going to be happy with mine because, like, I love to tie flies, but that's to support my fly fishing habit. Like, the fly fishing is my addiction, and I tie flies to support that addiction. But it's because I have a YouTube channel that's centered around fly tying. that's what I'm known for. So when you look at some of my early videos from 6 or 7 years ago, and I did share more of those intricate techniques, a lot of people look at it as like, oh, like Tim is one of us. And I'm like, oh, like I am, like I love the fly tying, but it's to support my dirty habit because I got to get fishing. Like if I'm not fishing 3 days a week, like this is an off week. Like I got to get out there.
I'm not one of you guys. Sorry.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I know. Don't
no,
tell
no,
them,
no,
please.
no.
Anyone who sees me at the symposium next year, just forget what I just said.
That's funny. What's got you excited about fly tying? Like these days?
Gosh, I can tell you, seeing all these. I guess what gets me really going is knowing there's all these different styles that I haven't fully explored yet. And I love the jig nymphs. I'm completely into that style of fishing. I completely invested a few years ago. Yeah, and you just catch so many more fish. There's no question. Anyone who says you don't, they haven't committed to it. You do. I remember when I first started getting into the tight line nymphing, I would come home from fishing and my wife she would ask, how'd you do? And I'm not a numbers guy, but I would have an approximate number. And at one point she said to me, are you like, is something happening? Like you're saying numbers that are like double what you would normally say. And I was like, yeah, like this is it's really that effective. And I was fishing the same waterways and it kind of forced me to explore new waterways too, just to see like, are there really this many more fish? And I'm not going to say numbers, on a podcast, but if you're not getting that success, maybe you should invest in a guide because those numbers really do exist. And whenever I started hitting these numbers, I was like, wow, like this is crazy. And it really just made me want to learn more about the notion of jig nymphs and about these slender bodied flies or about these just flies that can imitate anything. So that got me super excited for a few years. And right now, like I'm on a current kick with articulated streamers and just I'm fascinated with the streamer game. And I feel like I'm like 4 years behind, but I have these streamers that I've been fishing and I've had lots of success with them. And now I'm like, gosh, I just read another book from Kelly Gallup and I'm like, I'm going all in again this year. I'm buying a new rod. I just got a new line. And it's like, it's knowing that there's just that next thing there's never that end. Like you can't just say, I did it. Like I'm done. No, it's kind of maddening, but that's the beauty of it.
Absolutely. Like just the absolute, like you say, it never ends. I mean, streamers is a whole other ballgame. I mean, we've got a friend down here who his name is Nick Groves. He ties pretty beautiful streamers.
Oh yeah, big time.
Catching those big browns in the Grand. I mean, God, those are cool streamers, man.
I wouldn't do it. I remember my biggest fish on the Grand was on a streamer years ago. That was I remember this brown that just chased his streamer out, and I didn't fish a streamer since there. It was just like that was just the one time I used it. Now I'm looking back at these days like, why did I not keep fishing streamers? I got this. I had the response and everything, and I just didn't go back to it.
Hey, I think the one thing to note is just like there's no necessarily right way to do it. It's just like some things produce more fish. Doesn't mean it's the right way to do it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're exactly right.
Or the right thing for that person.
Yeah,
I think it's like
that's right.
Talking about what we were talking about maybe when we started the podcast. Maybe some guy like I've got a friend James. He just loves streamers. Like I'll be out fishing him on nymphs all day, and he doesn't care because he wants to catch one on a streamer, right?
Exactly.
I mean, we're all swinging two-handed rods for steelhead, but we know the guys that are fishing eggs. Like egg patterns and an indicator, catching way more fish than us.
Yeah.
But it's like you just find your thing and you kind of get stuck to it. Bridging off of like what we were talking about, like what gets you excited. Are you seeing like a switch to like more like interesting new, like if we're talking about articulated streamers and tungsten heads and stuff? Are you seeing? Are there any other like innovative materials that are getting you excited as well? Like, oh man, I can't wait for because for example, this year I went nuts with tying with tungsten and nuts with tying with EP fibers and stuff like that. Which I will say that like although I've tied my entire fly fishing career since I was 10. There definitely was a departure there for about like a good 8 years when I was running restaurants, and I was like, I've got no time to tie. But now that I'm back into it, I'm like, there's all these new things that I'm, and I was working at Drift, the fly shop here in Toronto, and just exposed to all these amazing materials, and there's more and more, and now I'm fishing saltwater more, and and eat like things like and big pike flies. We took a big pike trip this year, and so for me, like, tying those big predator flies with huge like EP fibers and using tungsten, slotted beads and stuff. That's got me all excited. So I don't know what's getting you jazzed.
Yeah, that's you know what, I won't lie. Like I know exactly what you mean. It's like there are those things that kind of keep you coming back, and it's like, wow, how did I miss out on this? I'm a little bit more nerdy when it comes to some of that stuff because it's like the little things in fly tying are kind of the things that pull me in. Now, the one thing I'll say, I'll take a step back because I'm friends with a lot of these people who will fish for some of these competitions, and because of kind of my role and that I am seen as this personality in a sense. I'm very fortunate in that people will share certain patterns with me, and they'll be like, Tim, you can't tell anybody about this fly, but you're going to just slaughter fish on this for the next year. It's going to come out eventually, but you just can't be the one to let anybody know about it. I'm like, which is cool, but it also stinks because there's certain materials that like people wouldn't even think these are fly tying materials, and then sure enough, like, wow, you're catching all these fish, and like we could talk about the squirmy wormy and like those types of flies that like, you know, people had known about them. Like I had known about that fly for a while, but you just couldn't say anything until, you know, sure enough, like people started to see it in a fish's mouth on Instagram. And then, you know, they just started asking questions and one thing leads to another. And now we're all fortunate enough to fish with it. So that's the one side of like, you know, being part of YouTube and having this, I guess this type of a channel that it's cool that I do have access and I do see some of this like stuff that a lot of the public probably won't know about for another year, which is, it's great. But then the other side of it is like, man, here I am, like I'm trying to share, but whenever you're put in confidence, like, hey, this is a new thing, but you can't do it. It really stinks because that's just the way it is. And my channel is about like not sharing or not like holding back secrets, but if it's mine that I've, you know, uncovered myself, or if it's already out there in a sense, and if I see it anywhere and I know about it, I'll immediately tell the person who told me, hey, it's here, just so you know, like I'm sharing this now. Like you're okay with that now, right? And they're like, yeah, because I don't want to also lose that confidence in the person because, like I know, I think on your show you've had a couple individuals who are on Team Canada for their fly fishing team.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, like those all these individuals, they connect after all those gatherings, but they're trying to win and they're competitors, and they know like if they have that next big thing, like they can't let the other teams figure it out. It could be a technique, it could be a certain material, but once they have that thing, like they just got to hold on to it for a while until it does run its course and people do find out about it. So with that said, I can't go down that path necessarily, but I will tell you probably the three biggest things that I've really been at least the most impressed about. So I'll kind of do a few that I've been impressed about and then a few that I'm looking forward to. I mean, I can think back to when I was, you know, growing up and I loved dry flies. And the hackle that I had was terrible because I didn't have any money. I couldn't afford the good stuff. And the good stuff back then is like garbage today. So whenever I see like this one website that has a flash hackle sale and like you're looking at these pictures of these saddle hackles that will tie like size 18s and 20s, and there's like 200 feathers hanging off this thing, and they want $200 as well. I'm like, oh my gosh, like look how nice this stuff is. Like we didn't even have that stuff then. Like it just blows me away. But then I look at it from the other perspective. I have all these necks and all these saddles, and I rarely use hackle anymore. Like I love deer hair and CDC, and those are kind of like my go-to materials now. So it's frustrating because it's like we have this wonderful resource of hackle today, and I don't even take advantage of it as much as I should. So that's the biggest advancement I've seen, at least, has been hackle. The other thing that I really have been just super impressed about has been kind of the creation and the advancement of all the glues that we have in fly tying. I mean, I'll go back to my Uncle John. Like, you couldn't use super glue in a fly. If he would have seen like super glue anywhere near my fly tying desk, he would have thrown it away. Like that wasn't something that you used. Yeah. And I can still like remember the first fly tyer that I saw that as this individual was tying this fly, and it was I think a pike or a musky fly. They just put a bunch of super glue with the brush on their thread, and they wrapped it like 15 times, and they just cut it off. Yeah. They didn't whip it. They didn't, and they acknowledged, this is a relatively famous fly tyer. They acknowledged to the crowd, like they didn't even know how to do a whip finish, but it didn't matter because they had super glue. And that was kind of like an eye-opening moment for me because here I am thinking like, you have to know how to whip finish. Like everyone does. Yeah. And this guy, like he's a great fly tyer. He catches these monster fish. He's never done a whip finish in his entire life. So knowing that we like now thinking about super glues and how I was resistant to them, like now if you look at it, like I'm on the pro team of Solaries and I'm using these UV products and I'm like, man, I don't even have to tie in rubber legs anymore. I just set a rubber leg in a little, dab of like a thick UV glue, hit it with the flashlight, and then run up my chenille for like a patch rubber legs. It's like wow, I don't even need thread anymore on some of these flies. When I say that, like almost serious, like there's almost you kind of have a complete new outlook on time because of glues today.
That's crazy. Like that's like yeah. Like I never like I love tying flies. I never thought about glue in that way, but it's true. Like it's advancing to such a, you're almost just you can just patch it like you said, patch it together without thread if you want.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
I love the UV glue.
Oh, don't you? Isn't that stuff crazy?
It's awesome.
It's crazy.
Yeah, no, I love it, but the eyes keep falling off, and it's not because of the fish, because I'm not catching any. So like, I feel like.
Wait, what do you mean? What do you mean the eyes are falling off?
I think he's talking about his pike fly.
Yeah, the pike fly. My pike flies, the eyes were, they kept, falling off, and we.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know if there's like a better way to.
I will say though, I had one fly when we were up north, and it had one eye on and one eye off, and that was like the top producer, Blinky. I called him, I called him Blinky.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point. I mean, are the pike really concerned whether? Oh my God, does this fly have eyes? Is it real? You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So that's the other thing, but.
Yeah, what do you think? Do the fish care about these little details? Like,
no, they don't. No, of course not. Come on. I was teaching a fly tying class last week, and it was on articulated streamers. And as I'm tying this, we finished the streamer, and I put on one of those sculpin heads. Do you know what those are?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. They're, I think, from Flymen Company. And if you're not using a sinking line, it's nice to have that fly head on there. And we talked about that. So I super glued it on. I put some thread at the front, hit it with super glue in the front again. And then I said to them, all right, if I was making a fly tying video for YouTube, this is where I would put on the eye and put super glue over it so it doesn't come off. Mm-hmm. But since I'm tying it for you, if you want me to do that, I will, but I'll let you know, like, I'm just going to take a black Sharpie and just color it black. Like, if I want something that's going to represent an eye, I'm going to put in, like, a giant, like, dumbbell eye that has complete, like, red, it's just complete red all around with a little black dot in the center, or I'm going to put in something that's just so atrocious that you can't miss it. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to some of those other things, I mean, from a streamer perspective, those fish are chasing. Like, it's just a reaction for them. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm sure somebody's going to just, light me up to say, no, it's all about the eye. But no, it's at the end, it's not. No, like it's not about that at all.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not matching the hatch, I mean, how accurate do you have to be?
Yeah.
No.
But that's the interesting part, I think it's almost like in your mind, what elements do you think you need in order to have a fly that is a fly attracting fish and wanting them to eat it? Because we talk about the eyes don't really matter, the colors for certain things. It's like they're kind of for us. It's like so. What are the elements that are sort of necessary for attracting fish?
That's an awesome question, Mitch. And I think if I had the true answer to that, I would probably be a millionaire in fly fishing, or at least have $1,000 in it. But I kind of think that really is what changes based on the situation that you're in. I don't want to give a cop-out answer, mm-hmm. Be like, well, it really changes. But I think that's the ultimate variable in fly fishing, and that if you're in a certain situation, like maybe they do want something, maybe you want something slender, not because the fish are feeding on something slender. I mean, let's talk about a specific fly, like the Paragon fly, or a very, we'll say a thin thread body, jig nymph. So we'll just kind of go down that route. And a lot of people are fishing those flies, and they're fishing them in like a foot of water, and they're just dragging them on the bottom. And it's like, well, that's not really the instance where you're intended to use that fly, because the whole notion is that you have this super thin, Paragon pattern. It's created by the Spaniards, and you're fishing it on 7X. So like if you're fishing a really fast run, it can get to the bottom of that run a lot quicker and have a lot less resistance than others. So in some instances, it's just that, at least from my opinion, whenever you're having success with that pattern, with a specific pattern in that situation, you're having it because you're putting a fly in front of a fish with less resistance than other people have been able to. So I think that's been part of the success for a lot of the patterns that people have, is that, especially now that they're tight lining or they're finding ways to reduce their resistance, they're making it look a little bit more like, I'm not saying something natural, mm-hmm. but they're making it act a little bit more natural. And that's probably the most important part. And that's something that I've learned from more fishermen that have the people. I typically practice catch and release, but I can tell you from like people who kill fish and who eat them on a regular basis, mm-hmm. whenever they look inside of a trout, we'll just go down that path, and they say, like, this is what the fish is eating. Mm-hmm. There's like leaves and little pieces of wood. I mean, for a fish, they're facing upstream, and they have just all this stuff just pummeling them, and they have mm-hmm. to make this split second decision. Like, do I eat this or do I not? And I think that's why people have had so much. I know that's why people have had success, is that they're able to take these flies that may or may not be great flies, but they're able to put them in, and they're able to present them now in a manner that, even if it's not something that fish is eating, it could be a color they've never eaten in their entire life, but they're willing to try it. And that's kind of shifted the thinking on it. Now, whenever we talk about like emergers or dry flies, now that's completely different, because like that was my expertise when I was a guide. I was kind of known to be an emerger guide, and I was able to help people catch technical trout on the Delaware River. Like that was my thing, and I loved it. And for me, like that was really the notion of fly design and how you're presenting the fly to them, and you're trying to find these characteristics that the fish are keying on, because to everybody else it looked like these brown trout are just taking, we'll say, a sulfur dun on the surface, and that's what it looked like. And you would see these little sailboat sulfurs floating down, and these fish would eat it. You would float yours down on 6X and 7X, and if you had it 8X, and they would just ignore yours. And then if you took a second, you were able to finally like seine the water, and you would look at the pattern, you would realize it looked like a dun on the surface, but they actually still had their trailing shuck attached. So then if you had a fly that had trailing shuck attached, like first cast with like 5X, you got this fish. So it was it was cool, because if you had an understanding of what was going on from that perspective of the entire mayfly life cycle, you had more success. And I think that's for a lot of people now who are getting into trout fishing, and they love the nymph fishing component. I think when they start to think about what's the next game, it's about figuring out a little bit more about like the insects that the fish are eating that are a little bit more technical trout, and then trying to figure out ways to fool those ones.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, honestly, it's such a cool way of looking at. It's more about imitation than it is about necessarily the fly you're presenting. I mean, obviously the fly is important, but presentation is such a key factor, and that's such a cool way. Of course, it's sort of one of those things where it's like, of course, but it's like, I think sometimes we might forget that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's the rule, Tim. That's the rule we had when we went out to Attawabascat. When we're tying our flies, it's like, make sure that thing needs to push water. I mean, because that's what the pike are going to be attracted to.
But at the same time, Tim, the best thing about Attawabascat is pike up there would eat a sock attached to a hook.
Yeah,
which was awesome for us, because we're like, let's tie flies. We stick bucktail on a hook.
Yeah, but
we're
Mitch,
like, done.
The sock pushes water, dude.
That's true.
Yeah.
Right? No, that's a great way. That's a great way of looking at like the effectiveness of fly patterns, is imitation, and put that time in on the water.
Yeah.
The other thing I'm curious about too is just, okay, so let's say you come to a new body of water. I don't know how often that happens necessarily, but you come to a new lake, you come to a new river. What's your sort of thought process with picking a fly to start fishing that lake or river? Like, how do you start? How do you decide just how to hit the water?
Man, that's an awesome question. I guess I'll tell a story. Maybe this will help. Once I got into the tight lining and all that fun stuff, I mean, one of the most common patterns that people know about right now is called the sexy waltz. And it's an awesome pattern. It's basically just a very slender hare's ear with a hotspot collar or a hotspot butt or something along those lines on a jig hook.
Yeah.
And it's a great fly. Catches a lot of fish for a lot of people. Yeah. And it could be a caddis, it could be, a light colored mayfly. I mean, it could represent a lot of different things, but it just looks like something in the water. It's just buggy enough that the trout want to try it. Well, I was fishing these brook trout streams this one day, and there's this one brook trout stream. And this is a brand new piece of water that I was on. And it's this brook trout stream that flows into another stream that's maybe 25, 30 feet wide. And right where, this brook trout stream, comes in right there at that mouth, there was a little riffle downstream from it. And I thought, geez, this riffle leads to a run. Like, this is the perfect water for this sexy waltz that I have on. I think I even took off the one with the hot spot. It was just a gray one. Yeah. And I come through and I start catching fish, and I caught maybe like 6 fish through this little riffle. And now I'll take a step back. I'd never fished this little stream before. Mm-hmm. I didn't know anything about it, but to me, I just felt like 6 fish wasn't enough for this little spot. It just didn't seem like it was enough. And there was just something that was bugging me. Mm-hmm. And I look back through the water and I say to myself, wait a second, I'm on a freestone stream. I think if the fish were going to respond to something, they'd respond to brown, not gray. And the one that I had on had more gray in it than brown, because I had been fishing like a limestone stream. Yeah. And a lot of fish in those limestone streams feed on scuds, and they're and crest bugs, and they're very gray in that stream I was fishing. So I was really leaning down that gray path, and they were extremely gray, sexy waltz. So I went back to the bottom. I put on a brown one. I went back through, and I got like 6 or 8 more fish. And that just instantly, it kind of reaffirmed that, sure, you could do it with a generic pattern, but if there's a certain color those fish are kind of a little bit more prone to eating, you're going to have even more success. Right. And it was like that was kind of an eye-opening moment for me that I was able to put that all together and say, this is even a freestone versus a limestone, just that little color. And the flies were identical in terms of size, in terms of ribbing material, but it was just one was really gray and one was more of like a brownish tan. Yeah. And that was all the difference. So whenever I look for water types, I take a step back and I think about what's the temperature for the day, where are the fish going to be? Is it a sunny day? Is it a shady day? Mm-hmm. If it's sunny, they probably won't be in that sun depending on the water depth, or if it's cold, they might be closer to the sun. So there's a lot of factors that I look into. The tricky thing is, and I think now that I kind of go down that path where whenever you have a lot of positive experience fishing, we'll say like a riffle, that whenever that riffle's not on, you have to know what to do next. And I think that's kind of the fun part of it, where you can say, well, here's some pocket water. I can't drift that Paragon through because I'm just going to be hanging up on the bottom. Instead, let me go with a WD-40 that looks like a blueing olive, because I know blueing olives are prevalent here, and that's not going to be dragging on the bottom, but I can still have contact with the fly. Yeah. So I kind of look for water type, and I think about temperature, and then I start to kind of pick it apart from there. And that we're assuming there's not a hatch going on, there's no dry flies. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tim, what is your favorite way to fish? Do you like streamers? Do you like dries? Do you like nymphs?
Yes. Yes.
Good question.
Yes.
All three.
Is it bad? Yes. I love dry fly fishing. There's no doubt about it. If I had to just fish technical dry fly fishing for the rest of my life, like, sign me up. I'm in for it. Like, I love it. I have gotten away from it recently because, as I said, I have a son. He's 3 years old, and I like to be home to put him at bed every night. So in the summertime, I'm really fortunate. I fish about 3 or 4 days a week every summer, and that's like three full days a week. And I've told my wife, like, listen, she works every day. We have a nanny that, stays on. We have her through the school year, but my wife agreed, like, hey, we should probably keep her on for a few days a week during the summertime, just so she doesn't go anywhere. And which I'm like, yes, like, I got a nanny to watch my son for 3 days a week. I can go fishing.
Yeah, it's a great idea. It's a great idea, honey.
It was a wonderful idea. So I'm like, yes, I'm all in for this. So those 3 days, like, I'm gone. I'm leaving the house around 6 a.m. I'm driving, 2.5 hours one way. I fish all day, and I get back for around 4 or 4:30 every day. So that hatch time in the evenings, that hasn't been there for me over the last few years. I still have those experiences here and there, but I haven't had that fishing. So whenever I have an opportunity for it, like, I'll be going to Wyoming here in a couple months to fish with a buddy of mine.
Where?
We're going to be fishing the North Platte River.
Yes. Where? Yes. I fished the North Platte 2 years ago. Where, like, around Casper?
I have wherever he tells me we're going. I have no idea. I don't know.
I fished the North Platte. I guess upstream from Casper. Good times.
Okay.
Really, really beautiful. Yeah. Huge rainbows. Okay. Huge.
Okay. What's the fishing like? Dry fly? I've heard it could be.
Well, I was there.
I was there. Stonefly hatch. I heard.
I was there in April, and I was there in April, so I probably missed the majority of the hatches. But I did. So it was a lot of nymph fishing for me. A lot of midges. A lot of midges, but it was insane the size of fish I was catching on midges.
Wait. Tim was asking whether to use stonefly. Sorry, if there's a stonefly hatch. Well, what time of year did you go?
Yeah, I was there pretty early season, like pre-runoff, and it was awesome. Like, I encountered a snowstorm one day, but it didn't seem to. It was just crazy. It was crazy. It was great. It's beautiful. Wyoming's beautiful. Everybody should go to Wyoming. Although I'm pretty sure everybody in Wyoming is happy that everybody's going to Montana instead.
Yes, I think you're right.
But there's some fantastic fly shops in Wyoming.
Cool.
In Casper and closer to the river itself, and you're gonna have a blast.
When are you going, Tim?
Cool.
When are you going again?
So that was part of the fun. That's another fun story too. Yeah. So this trip is set up that we were able to go over Easter.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be leaving my family during Easter, and I'm Catholic, so that's probably not going to go over very well with my entire family. But my wife supports it; she supports the
right
trip.
on.
So yeah, we'll be fishing Easter Sunday. So it's
Cool,
gonna
no
be,
problem.
we're gonna
We'll
blast.
see you there. Should we come? Tim, is
If
this
you
an
wanna
invite?
come.
Tim, are you inviting us?
Yes, come.
Yes,
Yes,
that'd be
come.
good.
We're gonna have a blast down there.
There-
We're gonna record some videos there. We're gonna have a great time. I can't wait.
Yeah, this is I'll never remember the little town I was in, but there's like this hilarious diner with like these like 4 shacks behind it that you can rent. And I was sleeping in my car the most of the time. But this one night I was just like this snowstorm rolled in and I was like, oh, there's no way. And you can rent this little shack and eat sloppy joes at this diner. I wish I could remember what it was, but it was awesome. The first morning, I like kicked the door open, and it was like the snow's blowing in. I'm the only one in there. The place is covered with dollar bills, like people sign dollar bills and staple
I
them
love
on the
that.
wall. Yeah, I love that too. And the woman comes over, who is serving. I'm the only one in there. I'm like in my waiters, and she's like, "Whoa, you're brave," and just drops the pot of coffee in front of me. And I was like, and she's like, "You just keep the pot." And I was like, she's like, "What do you want?" I'm like, "I don't know, 3 egg breakfast over easy or something." And then she's like, got a smoke. She's smoking, and she's like, "Do you want a cigarette?" And I was like, "It's 7 a.m." I'm like, "I don't really smoke, and I don't even smoke." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, why not?" And then she goes,
When in Rome.
and then she goes into the kitchen and like is cooking my eggs with like the frying pan in one hand and the cigarette in the other. And I'm
Oh
not
my
saying this.
gosh.
I'm not just saying this to complain. I'm saying this because that was probably
Good experience.
the greatest experience
Yeah.
That's
ever.
hilarious.
Yeah, I was like, if only things were so loose up here.
You should send us
No,
some.
you can't forget. You can't forget something like that. No. And wait,
No,
did you say you were in Casper? Is that where this? Because I think we're staying in Casper. I'm pretty sure that's the area where
when
we're
I
based
when I
out of.
got into Wyoming, I was in Casper, and then I drove upstream. And if I can hear, like maybe as we're chatting, I'll just check out Google Maps, and then I'll have an epiphany.
Yeah.
You
But I
guys
was
are staying in Casper. Is where you're going?
I want to say we're staying in Casper, and I know we're going to have a guide on the first day. So we do have kind of a guided
Yep.
experience.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's a backstory to all this, but the gist is we'll have a guide for the first day, and then the next 2 days we're kind of on our own. So we're looking forward to it. That's for sure.
Yeah, it was funny. I had no plans on really I knew fishing I was on this road trip and I'm probably gonna stop in Wyoming, but I had all intents and purposes going to Jackson Hole, and I was fishing the Frying Pan River, and I'd got a hotel room for the night, and then this it was hilarious. Like an ad came up for tourism Casper, Wyoming, and it had somebody fly fishing in it, and I was like, "Oh, that looks pretty cool." And then I started doing some research, and I was like, "Oh, I'll just go there." I don't know. It was like
Advertising works.
it was.
Yeah,
I
I
know. I was like, "Oh, I just got advertised too," but in the best possible way because I got to catch some of the biggest browns in my life, rainbows in my life.
Oh my. Yeah.
You're gonna have a good time.
Oh my gosh.
You're gonna have
I
a good
can't
time.
wait. Now I'm so excited. I mean, my buddy, he texts me every day. He's like, I can't wait. I'm like, I know. I
No,
only
it's
have
insane.
a ticket. I bought like a one-way ticket on the way out because it was a pretty good price, and I thought, well, I'll just wait and I'll buy my ticket to come back to Pittsburgh at some point. And I haven't bought that return ticket yet. So my wife is like,
Smart.
you are coming back, right? Like you're not staying out there. I'm like, we'll
Awesome.
see. We'll
That's
see.
hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're gonna have a good time. Wyoming. Like I said, it's if nobody lives in Montana, nobody lives in Wyoming.
Okay.
So that's pretty
cool.
cool.
No, I can't wait. No, thanks.
So there's one other thing I want to ask, and I know we were talking about rivers.
Yeah.
We were talking about when you come to a river, what's your strategy for picking a fly? What about lakes? Like, how often do you fish lakes? Is it a frequent thing down there?
For me, it's been more frequent over the last few years because I love lakes.
Yeah.
Our lakes here aren't the ones that I fish typically aren't primarily for trout. So I'll preface it with that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want me to go down the trout line, I will say that there's a lake that I do fish pretty frequently that it does have trout. There's stock trout, and there's a second one that's really close to my house that has trout as well. So for those ones, I mean, if you're asking for advice, the first piece of advice is like both of those lakes, if you can figure out a way to determine the depth, that's huge. I mean, if you can kind of determine where the fish are in the water column, that's awesome. Now, I also cheat because I have one of those little float boats. I think I won't say the brand. I'm sure that doesn't matter, but I have a little boat that I get out in. I have the flippers, and if if you have an opportunity to purchase one of those boats, buy one, because in the summertime, I just leave it in the back of my truck. And as I'm driving, to go trout fishing, if there's like a really cool looking farm pond, I might just pull over and just say, hey, do you guys mind if I fish here for an hour? I'm not going to kill them. I just want to catch a couple fish. Yeah. That's all. Take a picture and be out. And I've never been told no. So people are just very, very friendly. Say, yeah, come in, catch a bass. And if there's a bunch of posted signs like we're going to shoot you, I probably won't ask. But for the most part, it's gone really well. So I love to do that, and it's cool to explore. But what I tend to do is I look for places, if you can determine the depth, number one, if you can figure out if there's like a shallow lead into the lake versus a severe drop off, and I try to find those ledges. A lot of people tend to look at the surface of a lake and they just kind of think, there's really not much to see on the surface. But if you kind of take a step back and try to look at the surrounding land, you can kind of see the contour of the land and how it enters the lake, and kind of imagine if it continues like that, what's the lake going to look like? In some cases, it may just be a pretty even drop off the whole way in, but that's kind of the first thing I look for. And then if there's water sources coming into it, so one of the lakes that I fish has a spring that comes in, like I definitely want to fish in that area, especially as the lake starts to warm up because it's colder water entering. And then if you could find the area where that water exits as well, there could be some larger fish kind of waiting to capture bait fish as they get swept in that direction. So those are kind of my starting points whenever I'm at least thinking about where I'm going to be fishing.
It makes sense. Yeah, totally makes sense. But lakes can be I think lakes can be intimidating for people. They kind of come to a giant body of water like, I have no idea. What do I start trolling or something?
There isn't that obvious structure that sometimes a river can.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That's great.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Tim, it's Alcova, Wyoming. It's close. It's close to Casper. There were campsites near. There's the reservoir in Alcova.
Okay.
They dammed the river there, and it became like after the dam, it's like as any time you find a dammed river, a lot of midge fishing. But then I fished above the dam in Fremont Canyon. And Fremont Canyon is where I had, first of all, it's spectacular scenery, and also that's where the biggest rainbows, anyway, I found. But I fished in and around Alcova, and if you get a chance to eat some eggs and bacon at the Sunset Grill, I highly recommend the Sunset Grill. You can rent a shack for very reasonable price. And
I love that.
Then there's the Reef Fly Shop is there too. The Reef Fly Shop, those guys are super nice to me. They also do guiding. But yeah, Wyoming, you're gonna have a blast.
Aldo, I can promise you, if I don't eat at the Sunset Grill, I'll take a selfie in front of it, and I'll add it to my Instagram story at the very least. Okay?
Oh, my God.
At the very least, I'll do that.
They're committed to hospitality. The power was out, and they were still making sloppy joes and handing me smokes.
I love that.
So it's all good.
I'm just going to go there and ask for a sloppy Joe. That's I need a sloppy Joe for the river today. That's what I want.
Tim, I'm excited about that selfie, man.
I can't wait. I hope I find it. I hope she still has the cigarette.
I hope so,
too. Sloppy Joe's and a Camel Light.
Those ashes, that's what makes the flavor.
That is
adds,
the flavor.
Sloppy Joe makes. Yeah.
It adds.
You can't lose, those little, that's what adds character.
Those are the whole experience makes the food taste better.
True.
Well, yeah, I will literally never forget that restaurant. But I think Mitch is he's sweating.
I think it's time.
He's itchy. I think it might be
Uh-oh.
time for Mitchie's Fishy's Fun.
I think it's time for Mitchie's
Oh my
Fishies.
God.
Yeah,
My favorite part.
I'm really excited about this, Tim, honestly, and one of the questions in particular. But we're gonna kick it off with a great one. I love this question. Okay, are you ready for this?
Probably because he wrote the segment.
I wrote it. I love it, and I'm ready to ask Tim. All right, you ready?
I'm definitely ready. I can't
Mitchie's
wait.
Fishies. Here we go.
So
Okay.
here's the worst part. No,
Yeah,
hold on. I pause
yeah.
you. So I have to interrupt you.
Of course.
So, you know I listen to the podcast. I mean, I hope people who are out there know I listen to the podcast. And as I make my wife listen to podcasts as well. I just love
Thank you for that. Thank you.
You're welcome. No, I love it. I love the Mitchie's Fishies. And I said to Heather, I'm like, every time that the Mitchie's Fish is on, I'm like, I pause after it. I'm like, I'm going to practice what I would say if I was ever on this podcast. And the worst part is right now I'm thinking to myself, I don't remember the question.
What did I
like,
say?
I
Yeah.
have these. I've done the fishing like 6
That's
times.
awesome.
I don't even know what the questions are anymore. So I'm a little upset with myself. I think I know one of them.
I love that.
I'll tell you if you hit the one.
Tim, I love you. You're the best.
Neither do we. That's why we wrote them down.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Okay. Okay. Well, I'm like I said, I'm very like I'm one. This is one of the most exciting Mitchie's Fishies for me. The first one I want to ask you is, we'll strip it back. Okay. What is your favorite fish and why?
Okay, this was the one I remembered. This was the one, and there's no question. I love brown trout. I'm going to take the easy way out, like a lot of your listeners or a lot of your other the other people that you interviewed.
Yeah.
I guess though I'm going to put a little caveat in. I love brown trout. I think they're awesome, but I love wild brown trout. I mean, that's what I love. But I think now I'll take it the next step. I like that they're very aggressive. I love that they'll eat a dry fly, so I love that about them. But I also love that I can fish like in the same watershed in Pennsylvania, and I'll catch brown trout from different streams, and they all look different. And I love that. And I don't know how often you follow other social media posts from other countries, but there's some brown trout that they catch in Italy that are just like, they are gorgeous. And I cannot wait. I have to go over there just to catch one of these fish, just to look at it because it looks awesome. I think that's what I love about brown trout is that they just all look so unique, and there's just something spectacular about them.
Yeah, I mean, very early in I would say my fishing life, when was this? I think I was 19. I got to fish. My grandfather grew up fishing the Italian Alps. We're Italian descent.
Yeah.
And we were there for a wedding when I was 19, and I brought the fly rod, which I was a 2-piece fly rod. Which I fly with my fly rods now. It's super simple. You have your 4-piece rod, you carry them on, but it wasn't that simple when I had a 2-piece.
Nope.
Anyway, whatever. Long story short, yeah, I got the chance to fish some of his home streams, and I caught a brown there. And you're right, they look radically different than the trout that are here.
Oh man,
So
was it gorgeous?
Yeah, I mean, you got to go. It was beautiful. It was beautiful.
Would you? No, I'm curious. I got pick. No.
Yeah.
Would you catch these fish on? What kind of fishing was this over there?
Well,
I'm dying to know.
No, that's a really great question because we're from the my mother's side of the family is from like the north of Italy, and we were from Torino, and I went to Turin, and we went to a fly shop there, and I had brought all my trout flies or whatever, and I noticed that their trout flies were huge. They weren't different patterns or anything. Like there's still like Coachmans and Wolves and stuff we'd find here, but they're huge. Yeah. They're a size like 12s. They're a size 14s, and I was like, and I was like, well, I bought a couple. I was like, okay, I guess. And then I showed up at the river, and again, I don't have the type of knowledge I had then that I do now. But regardless, I looked at the river. It's glacial. It's like beautiful sky blue, and you can spot the fish. I'm seeing the fish. They're rising or whatever, and I'm presenting these. I'm like, there's no way these size 14 Coachmans are gonna work. So I've got my 18s and my 20s out, and nothing, and then sure enough, I tied. I was like, well, I should probably listen to the fly shop.
No,
and
really, the big ones work.
Crazy, yeah, and that's
that's crazy.
I know. I follow a few, or I've researched a few, Italian tires and some beautiful like competition,
Sure.
Competition anglers that tie some beautiful flies. And now obviously everything's radically different. But in 2008, yeah, I was catching these. I caught a brookie and 2 browns. And we ate them all. Sorry, everybody. Sorry, everybody. But my grandfather. There was no way my grandmother. I think I put the first one back, and she almost shot me.
Oh, I bet.
So there was no way I wasn't keeping the rest of the fish. Yeah. But you're right. They're beautiful, and the streams up there are beautiful. We're from a region called
Sangiovese.
Yeah, San Giorgio. Sangiovese is a great.
I know.
But
one of my favorite wines.
But yeah, we if you get the chance, these, and that's why these anglers are so great, because they fish glacial water. It's extraordinarily clear. It's extraordinarily thin, and the fish are extraordinarily spooky. And so you can see why their patterns have developed and their techniques have developed out of pure necessity. Like you want to catch these fish.
That's the only way you're going to catch them. Yeah, and I think it's cool that you said your family's from Torino, because I'm Italian as well. My last name's Italian, and that's where my family's from. They're from northern Italy, somewhere. It's not the town of Torino, but it's one of those tiny little towns that's outside of it. So I've been dying. My wife and I we've each gone to Italy once on our own, and we honeymooned there once, but it was just more of like the fun Italy. We haven't gone up to northern. That's like our next trip. We're dying to go up there, and I'd like to, find my hometown for my family. So that's really cool, man.
There's a lot of really great trout fishing up there. Like
wow.
a lot.
Yeah. Thanks for telling me that.
And you're, like my grandmother's from Valle d'Aosta, which borders Switzerland. So you're like, you're smack dab in the middle of the Alps, surrounded
Bring
by
your
trout,
snowboard.
surrounded by trout fishing. It's really
my
cool.
God. And my great grandma was the exact same. Whenever she knew that I was going trout fishing and I would come back with nothing, she thought I was just like the biggest loser because I didn't catch fish. I was like, no, Grandma, we put them back. And she was like, why are you putting these fish back? Like, we eat fish. That's what we do. And she was so mad that she would get visibly upset. So I would just lie to her and say, I didn't catch any today. It was a bad day of fishing.
Yeah. My family gets like that too. When I go to when I actually frequented Trinidad a couple of months ago, and they're like, where did the fish go? I mean, well, I put them back, but actually I just didn't catch any. But yeah, other than that.
I love that.
Yeah.
No. This is actually a good segue into Mitchie's Fishies 2, which I'm just gonna ask. It's just because we're on the subject. We were on the subject. So we're talking about travel. We're talking about where you can fish. Mitchie's Fishies 2 is if you could fish anywhere in the world right now, assuming that it's the best time to go, where would you fish?
Ooh, oh gosh. Man, I have two spots, so let me think which one I would go. I would probably say I'd do Argentina. I've not done Argentina, and I've just heard there's just these big, silly, stupid brown trout, and I'd just love to get down there.
Yeah, like Patagonia?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, something like that. That's probably where I'd want to end up. Jesus.
And the second?
The second spot would probably be something saltwater because I've never had that true, bonefish, tarpon, permit experience. I've never had a shot at those fish before. I've never put myself in that situation. So that would be my number two. If I could go anywhere, it's like prime saltwater, you're on the flats, you're stalking these fish, and I got a shot for a permit, that would easily be my number two because I've just never done that. And it just looks like I'm afraid I would start fishing saltwater and fly fishing in the salt, and I would just be completely addicted and want to just have a second house there.
Just following from that, do you do a lot of, and maybe not saltwater, but do you find yourself traveling a lot aside from, outside of this, of the U.S., or maybe not so much?
Right now, no. About 5 to 10 years ago, yes, I was a little bit more, willing or a little bit more able to travel at the time. But, obviously when you're not married, you have a little less, constraint. So right now, not so much. I tend to travel more within the country, fishing for stripers or fishing for pike and that type of stuff, not just trout. I think I'm known for more trout, but no, I haven't been able to travel abroad as much and go fly fishing. So I'm hoping to do that more in the next 5 years.
Rad. I think we're gonna. Yilma, do you wanna field Mitchie's Fishy?
Oh, you're giving me a little bit of a. Okay, well, before I ask the question, Tim, my family lives in Tobago, and we have to bring you over. Okay. Okay. If you haven't fished the salt, come with us. I mean, I'm a beginner. You haven't fished the salt. We've got Aldo. We've got Mitch. Come with us, and we'll show you a good time. Stay will be free. I mean, I got to talk to my aunt first. So my aunt.
This is all hypothetical, but come with us.
Okay. I'll sleep in my car if I have to.
No, absolutely not. I mean, it's my Auntie June. She's a great lady. I mean, she loves my sister more. I don't know if she'll like me, but I mean, I can convince her and then we can all come down. Anyways, okay. So the third
number 3?
This is number 3.
Oh
and
God,
you guys are giving me a little bit of airtime, which is lovely.
That's the thing, Tim. I'm trying to spread the love a little bit, and
that's smart. Yeah, that's smart.
I'm trying to,
you're a good quarterback.
Spread the Mitchie's Fishies around. I mean, But this one's a good one. And feel free to take.
Is it going to come back to you for number 5 though? So you're going to give them 3 and 4, and then you get to close the deal. Is that how it works?
I'm doing 4 and 5, baby.
Yeah,
so,
I'm just doing 3.
And I'm very excited for number 5. I'll tell you that right now. So,
okay,
but
cool.
this one, feel free to dig on this one. This one's a little bit tougher to maybe answer off the top of your head. But Yelma, please.
Mm-hmm. So Tim, we all have special memories. What is yours? What is your special fly fishing memory?
Your best fishing memory.
Sorry.
See, this is why I got to do it.
Okay. Your best fishing memory.
The special memory. That is a good one. I won't dig too far. I mean, I can tell you I have some really fantastic memories of fishing with my father when I was younger, and he's still alive, and fishing with my great uncle John, who doesn't fish as much anymore. And I fished with some really special people over the years, and so I've been very fortunate to fish with them. I will probably say it's a little bit more recent, and I'll put this in the caveat that at the time it was not the best. Now I'm looking back, and it's wonderful. But I think I told you that I fish now with my wife and my son quite a bit, and we try to fish together like every weekend. And it's cool that my wife is like interested, and my son's willing to kind of hang out with us. So we've been in a really good place for the last couple summers. And so my wife's just like, she's learning how to fly fish, and she had gone brook trout fishing before, but now she was like, I want to have a fly line, or at least use a nymph line or something along those lines, and just learn a little bit more. So we're in this really great spot. There's for sure one or two big fish in this spot, and I have everything it's set up so it's just going to be a successful experience here. I know she's going to get a big fish or have a shot at a big fish. Yeah. My son, his name's Angelo. He's on my back. He's just hanging out just to kind of get him calmed down, and just so he would also just be in the moment. I gave him a lollipop, so he's eating his lollipop. Like everything's just like, I have everything just set perfect, and I'm like, this is going to be great. I have the net ready. She hasn't even made a cast yet, but everything is ready to go. And she makes a cast. My wife Heather, she makes one or two casts. Something happens. Angelo's yelling, so I turn and I hear my wife say, or something happened with her, and I look back, and there's the rod pointed straight up in the air, and we had two flies on, and she's just hooked into the tree. Yeah. And I'm like, shoot, this, you got to catch this fish now. I'm a terrible. You never take your wife out. I'm like, come get this out. This is ridiculous. Yeah. I just tied those flies last night. I'm getting ticked just seeing it up there. And at that moment, my son decides that the perfect spot to put his lollipop to kind of hold it in there so he could throw a rock in the water is to put his lollipop up through the little back end, the back strap of your hat, because it looks like it would just fit perfect there. Yeah. So he just decides to put his little lollipop up. I can feel the stickiness on the back of my head and my hair, and this lollipop is now it's stuck in my head. I look down and I see my wife just pointing her rod at the trees. All my flies are just disappearing. Yeah. The line's coming back through her rod. It's just all in a pile in the water. Yeah. My son's yelling because he can't get the lollipop out of my hair. Yeah. And I was ready to just go crazy. And I was I take my hat, I throw my hat in the water. I'm like, what the heck is going on here? I was just so ticked. And now I look back and it was it was an awesome experience. She ended up getting a really nice fish out of there. I don't think she landed that one, but she got a fish. My son survived the day, and it's and I kind of looked at that as that was it was such a bad moment at the time. And now I look back and I'm like, man, I'd love to be there right now. It just happened a year ago, but I'd love to be there now. And I know that I kind of look at that as oh, that was my hit bottom moment as everything was going on, and we've just had all these great experiences since then.
Well, and you'll probably feel that way for the rest of your life too, right?
Yes, I'm sure. Absolutely.
It's such an amazing story. I love the way you explained it too, how it went from sort of this most idyllic, perfect moment where you got your kid strapped to your back and he's just eating his lollipop and your wife is going, and it went just total chaos. But that's what makes it such amazing, such an amazing moment. I love that. Okay, Mitchy's Fishies number 4. Why do you fly fish?
Perhaps the most
existential,
philosophical, ethereal. No, ethereal's wrong.
Philosophical and existential are quite nice terms to put to it. I think it's really why do specifically you fly fish at all? What's the?
Yeah, man. Can I talk my way through this, and maybe by talking something will come out? I
love it.
The short is I don't know. I don't want to say I go out there to catch fish, and I'm not sure how many other people will say this. I know some people go out there and they're oh, I love the experience. I was outside and I got to see nature. And it's I don't agree. I agree with that. That side's all cool. Yeah. But I like to catch fish. It could be I want the easy fish or the big fish or the smart fish. Every day it changes for me, which fish I'm going after. And that's, I kind of intentionally think about that. But in terms of why I go, man, I just love to get out there. There's just something about, it doesn't matter if you're going in the early morning or you're going for, quick, to go out. There's a spot where I fish for stripers 10 minutes from my house, and I might run out there just for a quick hour and a half at 7:00 in the evening, just to get out there, just to catch that one fish. But there's just something about fly fishing that it just makes me want to be there, and it makes me want to, I don't want to say I just want to catch that fish, but there's always like that next fish. And I don't even want to say it like that because it almost makes it seem like I just caught this fish and I'm releasing it. I'm already thinking about the next. It's not that. It's just if I'm not out there fly fishing, like I'm thinking about like, man, I can't wait till I get out there and I can't wait to set that hook and then have that fish in and land that fish and be like, cool, I succeeded in that. And I think that's probably why I do it. This will be my answer. Now that I think I've made myself kind of talk myself into this.
Yeah.
When I first started fly fishing, and this is probably the same as tying, I didn't have that success. I can remember days when I would go and I would catch like one fish. Mm-hmm. And now it's like, I remember last year I got blanked once, like I think maybe 2 days. Yeah. And it was like, man, like you don't get blanked as much anymore. And it's like crazy. And when that happens, it's like, wow, like what happened there? Like you want to just point the finger. And I think that's probably why I keep going. It's like, as you get better and better, like I try to push to whatever that next level is. And I think it's that constant challenge of, man, before I caught like 2 fish and it's like, well, the next time I want to do better. I want to learn from that experience. Even if I only catch 1 fish, like if I have a new challenge and I learn from that challenge, like that's going to put me on this next step. And I think that's probably what keeps me going. It's like there's always another step to climb. And you climb that step and you're like, cool, I'm closer to the top. And you realize you don't even know where the top is. And that's probably why I fly fish, if that makes any sense.
Oh, it makes total sense. I mean, it's an interesting way to look at it. Like it's the next sort of challenge. It's the next catch. It's the next I mean, that's such a I mean, that makes so much sense with angling, you know? I mean, like that's what keeps us out there till the sun's gone down, right? What if this cast is the big fish, right?
Yeah, maybe. Absolutely.
It's a great way of looking at it. This next question of Mitchie's Fishies 5, I've never been more excited in my life to ask somebody.
It really hits the nail on the head.
Yeah.
So should I ask it?
No.
Okay.
Come on, baby. Okay, this I'm really excited to ask. Okay. What fly pattern... Here we go. You ready? You ready?
I'm ready.
What fly pattern represents you best and why?
Ooh, that's a great one. I love this question.
Me too.
Yeah, I do like this one. Yeah, I see. This is number 5, isn't it? That's why you saved this one.
This is it. Number 5.
Wow. Let me think about this.
For sure. Take 20 minutes if you want.
No, I don't need 20 minutes. I can tell you it's not going to be the mop fly or the squirmy wormy. There's no question about that. Mm-hmm. I would say, and this is maybe my hope to get back into dry fly fishing, but if I kind of think about myself and the style of fishing that I love and kind of everything that to me, this is what I love about the sport, I would probably say something like a sulfur emerger because it's dry flies, it's very technical, and I'm not just saying like this is when all the fish are eating. It's like whenever you have, you're honed in on a fish, you see this one, you know it's a big fish, you know it's very technical, it's in a really tough spot, and you know the sulfur hatches on it, and you know they're eating that, and there's something about that sulfur emerger that I guess I'm just drawn to that hatch. And whenever I think about like the fly that represents me, I'm not even sure what I would say about myself necessarily, but it's just got all these different components that when you put them all together, like it just works. And if you take each piece separate, it may not seem like that's the ideal thing going on. But once you have it constructed and you put it in that situation, that's like everything turns on. That's the gold standard right there. So for me, yeah, probably a sulfur emerger. That's the one I would go with.
Nice.
I love that.
Love that answer.
Yeah.
Love it.
Well,
yeah.
Thanks.
We haven't heard it before, so
yeah,
love it.
You're right. You're right. We haven't heard that before.
No.
Good. Don't let anyone take that one. That's mine.
That's yours. And do you think there's anything about that fly that connects to you, like personally?
Man, I don't know. Maybe. I mean, when I think about the hatch itself, I've had so many good experiences with friends during that hatch because it's a very popular hatch. Whenever I was growing up, like the sulfurs on Oil Creek, that was our big hatch. Like that's where you had to be. And it was about an hour and a half from where I grew up. And I would drive up there after school and high school and I would like just fly. I mean, I would break every speed limit everywhere just to get there so I could get on the water and be in that perfect spot for that hatch. Yeah. And I just like that was the time. That was like the place to be for that. So I think I probably have all those good memories about that. Yeah. And that was the fly. Like I wanted to fish the emerger, not because they wouldn't eat anything else. It was just like that was the fly that I thought would be the most productive fly. Mm-hmm. So whenever I think about it now, I guess the fly that I fished then, that sulfur emerger, has changed over the years to the point where there's one that I'm tying now that I'd like to release on YouTube, but there's talk of a fly tying company that wants to pick up the fly and they'd like to produce it for me, and which is like, that's awesome.
Baller.
Like, it's crazy to know that it's awesome. Yeah, it's really cool. But then, and that's like the newest creation that I have and it's a sulfur emerger fly. So I think there's maybe that creativity in that pattern kind of relates back to me as well.
Absolutely. And you know what? Like, I know it's such a strange question to ask. Like, does that fly actually embody any of your personal qualities? But I love to hear answers like that, where it's like, you know what? Yeah, it does, and for this reason, and to hear the stories of why, and you know, like this is what I fished then, and this is the history to it in people's personal fly fishing lives. I think that's a super interesting.
Well,
cool thing.
I probably didn't answer your question. I mean, you were going for qualities. I don't know if I could say. It's a traditional hatch, and I think there's that my backstory is it's that tradition that I kind of grew up in. But this pattern that I'm tying it's using some materials that aren't commonplace. They're probably materials that I wouldn't have used back then to even imitate it. So it's got some new stuff in it as well. So I'm not sure if you can kind of look at it from, I'm trying to push the limits now.
That is so cool. I think that's a perfect answer, and I'm really, really happy with that answer.
Well,
Absolutely.
Thanks, Mitch.
Yeah. Tim, it's been such an honor having you on the show, man.
Yeah, Tim, I mean, that was awesome. Like, that was a lot. It was great. You were great.
It was so much fun, and I can't thank you enough.
And I learned a lot. I love those pointers of, you know, these are the few things that we need to make sure when you're first time flies to make sure that you're doing. I love that. It's going to help me out a lot this year.
It certainly
good.
will.
You better reach out to me if you have any questions.
Definitely.
Well, you better. Please,
Definitely.
man.
Definitely.
Yeah, well, thanks, guys. I won't lie. It's definitely been a lot of fun. I would rather have been in the studio with you guys. I'm a little jealous.
Well, I mean, I think that just means
studio right now.
Yeah, no, of course, Tim. When you're down here, man, we got to have you in. We got to have you come into the studio, and we'll do a whole other episode. I mean, like, we could talk for days. We really could.
Isn't that the beauty of fly fishing? Yeah, we definitely could. No, that's for sure. And I really appreciate you having me on here. It's definitely been a lot of fun. It's been great connecting with you guys a little bit more so than just listening to you whenever I'm driving back and forth to places.
Well, we definitely appreciate that you do listen to us.
Definitely.
And yeah, I mean, like, friends with James, like, come on up. We'll fish the Credit or the Grand together or whatever.
Are you coming down for the gathering?
Geez, no, because the gathering I want to say is in May, and I'm a teacher, and I can only get so many days off, and I have a fly tying event at the end of April that I'm going to be participating in. That kind of burns one of my last personal days that I can use for school.
Yeah.
So it's tricky to get up there for that gathering. And I'm not building bamboo fly rods as much as I was when I was a little bit younger. I still fish them a little, occasionally, but that crowd is such an awesome crowd. So for any of your listeners that aren't even into bamboo, like, go there. It's so cool. Like, they'll want to build a rod after that experience. It's just incredible.
Oh yeah, no, we're excited to go check it out too.
Will you guys be up there?
Yep.
Yeah, we're gonna go. We're gonna get some tickets and go check it out and hang out with them and see what's going on.
Shoot some footage.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's gonna be cool.
You're gonna have a blast there. If you can get some of those guys on to interview them, that would be just phenomenal. Because there's some incredible rod builders that will be there.
That's a good idea.
I can't even imagine the type of personalities that you meet at those things.
Yeah.
It also sounds so secretive. The gathering.
I love it.
Oh, it's crazy. No, it's crazy. And once you start to realize the crowd, then you're like, cool. And whenever I see that, it's cool because whenever you go to the fly fishing shows, or like I'll be headlining this Midwest Expo in Michigan here in about a month or so, and you kind of see the fly fishing crowd there, and then all of a sudden you'll see this one person walking. You just know right away, like, that guy's into bamboo. Like, you just know the crowd. I don't know what it is about that group, but it's such a you can just really identify that group out of a giant crowd.
He's like a Jedi walking through the...
Yeah, it's weird. It's really weird. Yeah, and they find each other. They'll find each other at these big shows, and you'll see this group of people talking. You're like, there's the bamboo group. I better go say hi to those guys.
Amazing. Tim, thank you so much again for coming on the show, man. It's been fantastic, and we just appreciate it so much.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you got it, Mitch. Thanks for everything.
Absolutely. Okay, well, that's it from me, Mitch. Yelma?
Yes, Tim and folks, signing off.
And Aldo?
Tim, one quick note: where can people find your stuff?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Where they can find your videos? Where can they find pictures of you? How can they contact you? Do you want people contacting you?
Well, I'm on YouTube, so that's kind of like if I wouldn't allow that would not be good. YouTube is easily a good place, but probably I direct most people to my website. It's troutandfeather.com. From there, there's a little contact button, so you can send a message that comes directly to my email. My email is listed in the description of every single video I've put out since day one, and I'm on Instagram and Facebook under Trout and Feather, so they can. If they type in Trout and Feather, they're going to find me at some point. But thanks, Aldo. I appreciate that.
Right on. Well, Trout and Feather. Instagram, check it out, troutandfeather.com. It's an awesome resource. For us, you can find all of our stuff at the SoFly Crew on Instagram and whatnot. You can find us at sofly.ca. If you find us on iTunes and Spotify, it always helps if you give us a little rate and whatnot. Shameless plug here. This is me, Aldo. Tim, thanks for coming on the show. That was an awesome show.
All right, thank you so much, Tim, and take care.
All right, thanks, everybody.